Good morning, ladies. Welcome to Lydia's house. I'm glad you're here today. We're blessed to have a guest speaker this morning. Her name is Cheyenne Jenvey. She is a first-time award-winning author for the category of Overcoming Adversity that was given this summer in July in Phoenix, Arizona by the International Impact Book Awards. She is local to Fresno, California, and she wants to share her story of triumph with us this morning. The joy of her journey has allowed Cheyenne, who is filled with lots of strength, to share her trials so that others can learn from her mistakes. This true story is beautifully written, where many will relate and find their own hope forward to overcoming any adversity that they may face in their own lives. Today, she openly shares that it's not the fall, but it's the getting back up that matters. So please welcome Cheyenne Jenvey to Lydia's house this morning.
Thank you, Sylvia. Okay, I'm going to try to do this without crying, of course. But first, thank you to all of you for letting me be here to speak today. Thank you, Sylvia, for being a wonderful mentor to me today. So this is a very personal read that I will share with you all. Like I said, I hope I won't cry. Let's get through this together. So my speech title is It's Not the Fall, but the Getting Back Up, and it's based on a Vince Lombardi quote. It's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get back up. When we are born, we don't have a choice in who our parents will be. We don't have a choice in the genetic history of our parents. We don't have the choice to pick our name. And we don't have a choice in what generational bloodlines we inherit. We just enter the world and absorb that which is our environment, those which are our influences, those which are our building blocks to stand on. We accept our parents and trust them automatically. We learn the definition of love immediately by the embrace of our parents, holding us as a newborn baby, and then them speaking loving words to us. We continue to live with this family given to us and begin to form who we are as an individual. Through the influences around us, we begin to develop our language and behavior by mimicking it, as this is all we know. Whether good or bad, all of this creates our identity and determines our future path ahead. When I was a baby, my father worked to support us as my mother was never capable of holding a job. Shortly after I was born, my mother began to drink and do drugs on a daily basis. As my father tried to keep my life as normal as possible, chaos was stirring all around me. Arguments began, tears were shed, slamming doors were the constant, daily yelling at each other became the norm. More drinking, more drug abuse developed within my birth mother. The first images of my mother were as a broken woman, never happy, and very insecure as well as codependent. I recall her depending on me for her own happiness. She became jealous of me once I became independent, walking and talking more. I recall her lack of attention to me and her never playing with me and her ignoring me for a very long time once as a baby when I almost fell off a balcony. Thankfully, I did not fall, but I remember how scared the adults were. I recall my birth mother and father separating and my going into her care. I was scared to be in my birth mother's care and away from my father. I knew at a very young age what good and evil meant. I recall the violence of watching my birth mother be beaten violently by men who were drunk or high on drugs. I watched her snort drugs, smoke drugs, and inject drugs. She slept all the time, rarely showering or preparing meals for us. I remember being ignored by her and pushed aside. Many times my suitcase was thrown out the window of a second-story apartment by her drug-using friends because they didn't want a child around, only to watch it smash onto the pavement and all my clothes and stuffed animals scattered everywhere. I remember the feeling I had at that moment of betrayal and how hurt I was that someone could do that to my things. I cried a lot and felt scared when I was around my birth mom. I recall the abandonment I felt when finally my mother left me in a dirty apartment and never returned. I remember the feeling of being hungry and wet in my diapers. I was discovered by the neighbors and my family came to get me. I remember the dismay my grandmother, aunt, and father had about me being abandoned like that. This was when my father finally took me at the age of 3 and cleverly gained full custody of me. As a baby, we fall down and everyone laughs. We think how cute she is. We then get help from others to stand back up and try again. We are encouraged. We are shown love and support. I recall the moment I fell out of my mother's love. I was around 3 years old when my father took full custody of me. My father was clever and knew my mother didn't really want me, so he offered her a KitchenAid mixer in exchange for me. It was a popular thing back then. She quickly grabbed the mixer, signed the papers, and never looked back. That was the moment when I knew she didn't love me. As I grew older, my birth mother was still allowed to have supervised visits with me. I recall her always appearing funny to me when she was still allowed to see me. She was always obviously drunk or high, as she would be nervous, paranoid, or shaky. Her neck and hands would jerk uncontrollably, and she would be always looking around as if the cops were after her. Her breath always smelled like alcohol, and she always smelled like dirt and cigarettes. She would give me gifts of stuffed animals from stores, and they too smelled like cigarettes and dirt. These supervised visits were in the company of my grandmother most of the time, who was a complete enabler and allowed my mother to take me to places where danger was in the midst. For the majority of my childhood, I would spend every other weekend in Exeter, California, visiting my grandmother. My grandmother was very naive and believed that I was in good care with my birth mother. Little did she know that she was releasing me into a chaotic world of drugs, sex, and violence. Little did my grandmother believe the horror that was happening, and little did she do to protect me. I think it was because my grandmother herself was a victim of domestic violence, and thus she felt trapped with the inability to stand up for herself. The inability to stand up for others, including her grandchild. While in the care of my grandmother, she allowed me to be exposed to the nightmare nights where I'd witness my violent alcoholic grandfather physically attack and abuse her, where most of the time I'd hide in the bedroom for fear he would come after me. The violent sounds of her body slamming across the room and onto the floor scared me and showed me that even adults fall from grace, and even those you most trust. There were countless weekend visits in Exeter where I was taken to houses full of drunks and drug addicts surrounding my birth mother. The bikers and drug addicts my mother hung around with would often lock me in closets and small cabinets, so I stayed out of their way. I recall being taken into stores by my mother and shown how to shoplift. I recall over and over the many beatings my mother or grandmother would endure, only to wake up the next day as if nothing happened. Many mornings I would wake up from hearing my grandparents already up early in the morning and always fearing what was on the other side of the door once I opened it. A lot of times I would go to bed with violent fights occurring between my grandfather and grandmother and unsure what was to be expected the next day. My normal routine in the mornings was that I would come out of my room and sit on the couch trying to ignore what had happened the night before. In the morning, my grandmother was always cheerful and pretending the abuse the night before hadn't occurred. She would fix me breakfast, mostly cereal and sometimes eggs. I remember as I tried to enjoy my cereal, my alcoholic grandfather would start drinking at the crack of dawn, would begin to verbally abuse me, telling me how ugly I was. He smoked cigarettes, and the smoke from his cigarette would often make its way into my face, and it would bother me. I hated it as it hurt my lungs, my eyes, and made it hard for me to breathe. I remember making a comment one morning to my grandfather that smoke always followed me in my direction and that it bothered me. This was when my grandfather explained to me that smoke followed me because I was ugly. I remember the feeling of complete unworthiness and shame and how much that impacted my self-esteem, all at the age of 7 years old. My grandmother quickly diminished that hurtful statement by telling me the tale, "Oh, smoke follows beauty," and not to pay attention to him. I wished it was that easy. Little did she know how much that impacted my entire existence and self-esteem at an early age. I also remember my grandfather attempting to sexually peep on me when I was bathing. I bathed in their common bathroom between 2 bedrooms. My grandfather would often purposely come into the bathroom to urinate. He would try to expose himself to me and I would turn away. He would try to get me to turn around and make fun of me because I didn't look at him. I remember covering myself in bubbles so he couldn't see my body. He would laugh at me wickedly and finish urinating and then leave. I remember when I was in my grandmother's care that there was no one who would protect me. I was afraid the majority of the time and walking on eggshells around my grandfather, afraid that anything would set him off in anger. My birth mother was absent a lot during my childhood. I came to find out that this was due to her being locked up in jail for her crimes as a result of her drug habit. I was afraid to play outside on the schoolyard for fear my mother would get out of jail and kidnap me in exchange for money to buy drugs. That was popular back then also. I lived in embarrassment most of my life as none of the other kids had such a traumatic opposite side of their existence. At the age of 13 years old, the traumatic moments came to a final end when my birth mother and I had a visit together to the zoo. My father took me to the place where she lived here in Fresno at the time. He dropped me off and I went inside. The place was very dirty, smelled like cigarettes, and she was not ready, much less sober. I remember us leaving for a zoo day and her bringing along a container that I thought was water or soda. Throughout the visit together, my birth mother began to change. And by the end of the day, I realized she was too drunk to drive us home. Feeling scared, I got in the car while she attempted to drive us home. Due to her being completely drunk and me being completely scared out of my mind, I demanded she pull over. I then forced her to get into the passenger seat. After a quick fight, she eventually let me drive us home. 13 years old. This was my final breaking point of it all, and I finally told my father of all the ugly truth that was happening around me. That was when I realized again that I would never fully or truly gain my mother's love and decided to stand up for myself. I began to trust and live more in my father's love, leaning more into his love, and learning how to trust his love. At this point in my life, he was the only example of a healthy type of love and the only example of safety and trust. As adults, we fall and people judge. As adults, there are expectations placed upon us. We don't get to choose this, society chooses it for us. As adults, when we fall, we have to quickly get back up or we are labeled. As adults, the pressures become more and more to perform and succeed. But what if, as an adult, The chaos versus normalcy returns and turns your life upside down, where you fall so far down, there's no way up. At age 13, I was so lost and exhausted from all that I had been through. I never spoke about the violence and the drug abuse when I was with my birth mother. I never exposed the mental and physical abuse I witnessed and endured by her parents, my grandparents. I never explained how much I was affected. I think the reason was partly it was too shameful and embarrassing to admit. And the other was that I didn't want to be taken away from my grandmother. I really liked and loved my grandmother, despite her faults. She was fun and full of joy. She and I were like best friends, providing each other ways to escape the horrors happening around us. I wouldn't recommend this, as keeping things hidden and silent results in patterns of behavior that can become destructive. When I was 15 to 16 years old, I began to drink. By age 16, I began to smoke pot. By age 17, I began to use methamphetamines. By age 22, I began injecting heroin and cocaine. My drug habit took me to places I never thought I'd go, such as stealing, prostitution, and many stays in jail, leading almost to prison. I was shown all of these bad habits by my mother, and now I was the one doing them. Now I was the one repeating history. As my habit grew worse, so did my crimes. I was arrested over and over for drug-related crimes. I was in and out of the Fresno court system and placed on felony probation after a final arrest for large amounts of cocaine and heroin were found in my purse. I began to live life running from the cops and away from my family. The father who once protected me as a child could no longer protect me as an adult. He watched painfully as I fell further and further downward, as others around me judged me and ostracized me, and even my own step-family turned their backs at me out of the tough love. My father never gave up on me. He believed in me that someday I would get up, get away, and step apart from that life of drugs and trouble. During all of this, my father never stopped loving me, supporting me, encouraging me, and believing in me. He never judged me, but guided me to a better life. He would meet me often for lunch and kept a distant eye on me during my worst of times. At age 28, I was arrested and in major trouble. I decided to run from the law and my probation and live life on the road with my boyfriend at the time. We packed all our belongings and lived on the run for about a week till I was caught and arrested. A week. It wasn't that good. The ironic thing was that I was actually thankful to be caught. I recall feeling happy because for some strange reason, I felt my life was going to get better. Like a long-awaited prayer was being answered. I was placed in front of the judge, Judge Cisneros, who had known me throughout several years of my drug addiction. I was placed in the PCDC drug court, which that stands for post-conviction drug court. That was a system where the court tries to rehabilitate you rather than lock you up in jail or prison. She was an advocate for drug users and believed in positive rehabilitation. I failed so many times with her. And this was the final time and my last ticket with her. I pleaded to her one last time to not send me to prison, but to give me another chance at rehab. I told her how this time I was ready to finally get help. She believed me, but gave me a very stern lecture. She told me that if I left this program, that I was going straight to Chowchilla prison for 5 years with no early release. That was when I finally got help and entered into a long-term rehab called New Life for Girls. At this time, I had no choice. I was facing 5 years in Chowchilla Women's Facility, CCWF, if I did not take this final chance at getting real help for my drug addiction. The judge ordered me to make a decision: spend 2 years in rehab or spend 5 years in prison. I took the latter and decided to get real help. I then entered into a program called New Life for Girls, which is a Christian-based program. The rehab began in Fresno, where I spent 6 months in one of their intro centers. Once they felt I had gained enough growth and change within myself, I was then sent to Dover, Pennsylvania, where I spent a year and where I met God on a new level, atop a hill, deep in the Pennsylvania woods. When I got to Dover, it was like I had entered the Garden of Eden. Seriously, it was beautiful. The compound was surrounded by large, tall trees, and all you could really hear were the sounds of birds. It was the most beautiful place on earth for me, and at the time I knew I was in a place where I was going to finally get help. A place where I was finally able to stand a chance of beating my addiction. The building was in the shape of a cross, with dorm rooms along the corridors, a chapel at one end, and the offices in the front. It had a basement, which was where the kitchen was. There were 4 grow rooms and 2 grow rooms where we had to share space and bathrooms. As I got acquainted and situated, I accepted that this was going to be my next adventure, and so in the year I spent in Dover, I immersed myself in forming my new spirituality for myself and a spiritual relationship with God, nature, and myself. I studied the Bible and, as instructed, and stayed out of trouble. I focused on my future goals. I began to dream and manifest all those things I had hoped for myself. I began to stand tall, and be proud of myself. I began to trust, and my confidence returned. I began to forgive myself. I took classes based on the Bible and memorized scriptures over 100 words long. Like, we had to write them out, like in King James Version. Like, that's hard. That's very hard. I worked various duties as staff once I was finished being a student. Students go through 6 months of learning and reforming to then enter into a staff phase for 3 months, becoming a volunteer staff, handling more responsibilities. As I grew further into the program, I stayed away from the other girls in the drama. I felt that if I were to survive and truly change, then I needed to form a relationship with God and a higher power if I were to be successful. I would spend lots of time walking the compound, listening to music, appreciating the nature around me, and talking to God. I began to receive messages from nature and God of what I was to become if I truly surrendered. I began to see images of me as a bright, happy, and strong woman again. I began to see that I had potential to succeed. I began to believe in myself. As I began to rest in this amazing love and guidance, the layers of harm, hurt, pain, shame, disappointment, and despair fell off of me. It didn't matter how far I had fallen, how many mistakes I had made, how much damage I had caused to others, or how much I had hurt others. The love from God was immense and took it all away. I began to forgive and make peace with those who had hurt me. I began to love and forgive myself. I began to become more spiritual and form a relationship not only with God, but to the earth, to nature, to other people, and to myself. I began to feel this amazing love from the universe. It was like the universe was celebrating me, welcoming me back home to the roots of my core being. It was as if I was being washed daily in this new beauty and love. I had never experienced such a love before, nor a relationship with an unknown being you cannot see, but you can only believe. Pure faith. Part of the program allowed student staff to explore and serve at other intro centers. Much like the Fresno intro I got started in, I decided to go to Chicago, Illinois' New Life for Girls Intro Center. That was where I became more of an official volunteer staff member and gained experience and skills by working with girls coming into the program. I will always remember the fear and uncertainty they felt on day one, to then see them transform into the beautiful women in just 3 months and ready to take that adventure to Dover. Pennsylvania. All intro centers house women for 3 months and then send them to the main training center in Dover to finish the remainder of the rehabilitation process. For me, it took 2 years to finish the program, but in those 2 years, I was transformed and I was delivered from the obsession of the mind for drugs and gained back who I was in the eyes of God. The 2 years spent away went by very fast, and before I knew it, I was about to graduate and return home. I was excited to return home to my father and fell into his arms again. Things had changed in the few months before coming home to my father, as he was diagnosed with glioblastoma brain cancer shortly before my graduation. Now my return home was more important than ever. The man I adored my entire life, the man who protected me, the man who loved me endlessly, the man who never gave up on me, the man who danced with me in the kitchen as a little girl, the man who dressed me and brushed my hair, the man who embraced me at every chance he could, the man who taught me how to fix things around the house, the man who made jokes and showed me how to drive at age 15, was now facing death. When I landed in Fresno, I was immediately taken to community hospital to see my father, who had now had his second brain surgery. Upon seeing each other, it was as if it was the day I was born at the same hospital back in 1977. My father was overwhelmed with tears of joy and loved to see me. All I could do was lay in his arms, crying tears of joy as well as a bit of fear because of the word cancer. But very grateful to be back together again with my father. I adored my father and he adored me. I recall that all I could feel at the time was his immense amount of love and happiness that I was home, healed, and back to the little girl he always knew and raised me to be. I have notes, don't cry. You all can cry. Fast forward to now, I am 20 years sober, and I continue to thrive to make my father proud. My father, unfortunately, did pass away in November 2007, but ironically, it was exactly 1 day, 1 month, and 1 year from my coming home from rehab. I'm kind of a number person that's kind of rare. In that year together, we made the most of our time. We watched movies, we played in the pool, we made dinners, and my father taught me how to make our famous Jenvey dressing, which is also known as stuffing, but it's so good. If I can make it for you ladies someday, you'll love it. I was able to see him smile and shout at the fireworks for the 4th of July. I was able to help him with his physical therapy as the brain surgery paralyzed 75% of his right side of the body. I was able to enjoy simple moments of him playing with my hair, as he loved my long hair. My father and I were so close, and I could feel how happy he was that I was now sober and back to the little girl he raised and believed could overcome anything if I put my mind to it. As his health declined, I remained faithful. I would pray and pray and pray. I would remain positive and hopeful. I did everything I could to be with my father, help him, and be the daughter he cherished. The connection between us was very strong, so strong that when the time came for his passing, I was notified spiritually with confirmation that time was near. I recall many nights where I was awakened by the Spirit and shown clarity of what my next steps would be. One night, unlike any other, I was awakened by the Spirit and given a message to say my final goodbyes to my father. And so when I was visiting him one weekend, I listened and followed course. I sat on his bedside and told him I had some things to say to him. As he was barely hanging on to life, I looked him into the eyes and promised my father that I would continue to live a sober life. I was able to promise him that I would never return to drugs and that I would continue to make him proud of me after he passed. Tears rolled down his face, and I knew he understood. Having that opportunity with my father provided a sense of closure for him, to be able to pass into the mysteries of death, knowing his daughter would be okay. My relapsing after his death weighed heavily on his heart, and by confirming to him I would stay sober, I feel helped him be able to pass on in peace. There was nothing more that he wanted upon his death than to know that I would be okay. As hard as it has been living without my father, my greatest hero, I feel I have kept my promise to him, and for that my path has been blessed. I continue to invite my father into my daily life, remembering him in all ways. Through his death, I inherited money, and with that, I chose to make a dream of mine become a reality. Many people in my rehab spoke over to me in prophecy to write a book, even before I even had the idea or passion. And so as a result, I wrote my autobiography titled Dragonflies and Demons, launched it worldwide, and now I'm sharing with the world my story of trials and triumph. Sharing the joy of my journey so I can help others. I have had speaking engagements for those formerly incarcerated via the My Hands Tied event, providing hope and encouragement to others. I have had the opportunity to serve inside Chowchilla Prison via the Land Together Farmers Market, providing fresh fruits and vegetables and handmade soaps to the incarcerated people. That was incredible. And I am the liaison of the UU Church of Fresno over the Holiday Gift Bag Project, like you also have here at Wesley, providing goodie bags filled with a variety of items such as colorful pens, pencils, toothbrushes, and flavorful lip balms, soaps, teas, hot cocoa, and candy canes. You know the drill. And I just won my first book award given by the International Impact Book Awards for the category of overcoming adversity. Pretty perfect category, I'd say. My book is available via Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other platforms by doing a Google search. So to explain why I chose the title of my speech to be It's Not the Fall, but Getting Back Up, is because this is the essence of life. We will always have trials that will knock us down. And just as babies when we fall and everyone thinks it's cute, and as adults we fall, we get back up and everyone still thinks it's cute. It should. Just cute in a different way. To get back up is the true testament of my story. In all the failures and falls in my life, I've always gotten back up and faced the day again. I am grateful for my past, my path, and my future. I hope to help many through my mistakes so others don't have to. I am honored to be of service to others and help them along the path of sobriety and spiritual security. We are not alone, and most of our experiences are just a small distance away from the next person's experience. I am grateful, and I know my Father is proud of me. Although I know he is not physically here, my Father is here in spirit, still guiding me, protecting me, and loving me. I know he is proud that I got back up after falling so far down to produce a beautiful life you see before you. To share further on why the dragonfly symbolism was chosen was for many reasons. Dragonflies are significant to me as they are rare to experience them due to their short lifespan. They don't live very long. The dragonfly is a unique insect because it can go in 5 directions. It can go forward, backward, side to side, and diagonal. So in my book, I do a comparison to how life can be to the dragonfly and how we can go in many directions in life, such as falling backward, pivoting forward, taking side-to-side moments or movements, and then maybe we go completely diagonal where we lose ourselves. But all directions are part of the process of personal growth. But the key is returning to the beauty inside us all, returning to the creature that God made us. So that is all. Thank you.
thank you to all that you could join us today. All of those watching online, we have questions that we are going to discuss here in the room, but we wanted to put them out for you as well so that you could think about these questions. First one is,